Well, I am here with Brandon Stanton, who is the original creator and blogger of Humans of New York. So Brandon, storytelling is a huge part of your career.
Right.
Where did that stem from?
Well, the storytelling was secondary. It came out of the photography because Humans of New York started as a photography blog. My goal was to photograph 10,000 people on the streets of New York City. And in the process of doing that, I kind of started naturally having conversations with the people that I photographed. They'd say something funny or something sad or something thought-provoking, and I would add it to the photo. And that turned into more detailed interviews, and then it turned into something where eventually I was, instead of being a photographer, I was stopping somebody and taking their photo, but then spending about 45 minutes with them trying to find out a story about their life. So it was, very incremental. It evolved. It wasn't kind of an idea that I had and I executed. It was just something that came out of meeting people all day long.
And where did the opportunity to start Humans of New York come from?
Getting fired is the short answer. I lost my job, and I had been working at this job for 2 years, and it was all I was thinking about. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, well, if I could just do anything I wanted to with my time, what would I do? And at that time I really enjoyed photography, and so I said, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to give myself a few months and see if I can structure a life around photographing all day long. And so my efforts with Humans of New York and moving to New York and embarking on this project was my effort to try to figure out a life where I could, support myself, pay my rent, and photograph all day long.
So you said you started off with photography, and now you've gone one step further, and now you're doing feature stories.
Right.
What made you want to do that?
I guess I could almost see, because I think what was interesting about Humans of New York originally was that I was stopping random strangers and taking their photo. And I think that made for a very interesting photograph because it was like a very intimate portrait of somebody you did not know. And, taking that further, it's that if I've already kind of stopped these people, wouldn't it be interesting to learn about who they are? And once I figured that out, that's when the website really, really started to grow. And I realized that the reason that the work was so interesting wasn't necessarily me being a great photographer, it was me having gotten over my fear of stopping strangers. And since I'd already gotten over that fear, the natural next step was to figure out who these people were. And I think that's what people are so interested in, and that's why the blog grew so fast, is because people were so interested in the people around them, but didn't necessarily have the courage to approach them themselves.
Is there a feature story that has impacted you more than others?
Well, there's been almost 10,000 now, so it's very hard to nail down, but some of them have turned into so much more. There's been stories that I've met a random person on the street, and through telling their story, there was one young man in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and he told me about his principal, and then I went and met his principal and told her story, and then I started telling the story of the school, and we raised $2 million for the school. And then me, the principal, and the boy went to Washington, D.C. and met President Obama in the Oval Office. So yeah, there's been a few stories like that have led to amazing things and led to amazing experiences. But as far as the stories inherently, being especially emotional or especially illuminating, I feel like they all are in different ways. I say that there's very few things that can happen to me in my life now that doesn't remind me of an interview that I did with somebody else. So the stories are important to me in different moments based on what I'm going through.
So it's a true skill to be able to not only have people to come up and talk to you, but make them feel comfortable enough to tell you their whole life stories.
Right.
How do you do that?
And I was explaining to Jordan, who does Humans of OSU, that that was a long learning experience. It was not that I got better at asking the right questions. It's not anything that you say. It's just that I started approaching people so many times that I went from being so nervous that I could barely walk up to somebody on day one to where I could just very casually walk up to anybody and immediately get into a conversation. And I was explaining to Jordan that there is a very small difference between the energy of a conversation and an interview. You know, there's a very small difference, but there is a mild difference in the answers that you get back if you are having a conversation with somebody as opposed to interviewing them. So I don't go in with a list of questions. You know, I go in, normally the first question I ask is, what is your biggest struggle right now? And then I just listen very closely. And then I ask questions based on my own curiosity. And so it's not even really an interview, it's a conversation. And when it's in that framework, when it's a conversation, people, I think they can sense your sincerity, they can sense your interest, they can sense your curiosity, and they're much more willing to be forthcoming. You know, it's something that's, you know, very hard to put into words, but it's something that can definitely be felt, that, you know, I got to be a much better interviewer when I did it so many times that I wasn't nervous and I was able to be present and very interested. So yeah, it wasn't something that I did intentionally. It was just something that happened.
That's incredible. Well, Humans of New York has become extremely popular, so much so that we even have a Humans of OSU, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel that you've started a trend like that?
It's very cool, and you know, it's always cool to meet the people and to hear from the people who have kind of done it in their own city. And there's some that have gotten quite big. Some of them are really quite good. There's, you know, some of them have turned into books. You know, and it is very cool to see. You know, and it's also, just on a practical level, it's great for Humans of New York because, you know, people might discover Humans of Oklahoma State, or they might discover Humans of Amsterdam or Humans of Paris, and then they start following that, and eventually through following that, they hear about Humans of New York. So, you know, not only is it very flattering, but it's also been a great way for people to discover Humans of New York. Yeah.
Well, what comes next for you?
One thing I've been working on very hard is I have done about 1,200 interviews on film that have not been seen before. So I've been doing that for about 3 years now. And I want to kind of weave these together into kind of a portrait of the series, or a portrait of the city, you know, through a series or through an episodes. A little bit different than just releasing them one story at a time, like on the blog. So I've been working on this for a very long time, and you know, I've almost finished, and I'm excited about that. So I'd say that would be the immediate next step. And then another thing I want to do is travel a lot more. I want to, you know, go to, you know, maybe 100 different countries in the next couple of years, and really kind of branch it out.
What country have you visited that you've enjoyed the most?
Well, you know, I think the work that I feel proudest of, you know, I enjoy them all. Some of them have beautiful beaches, and you know, just as a tourist, I enjoy them. But as far as the work, you know, the countries that, you know, I feel the proudest of doing are, you know, ones like Pakistan or Iran, countries that, you know, have maybe a very negative perception based on their portrayal in the media. And I think by going there and stopping random people on the street and not necessarily looking for negative stories about terrorism or radicalism, but just stopping random people on the street and learning their stories and presenting them without commentary, I think that has a very, you know, that has a very empathetic, has a very softening effect on places that might be feared. And so I think that those are the places that I'm proudest of, yeah.
So you've had an immense amount of success in your career. Is there any advice that you could give students about to graduate and going into this industry?
Well, you know, the advice I kind of give across all industries or across all things is that you can't wait for the perfect idea before you begin working on something like it's your job. You know, I think one of the main takeaways from the story of Humans of New York is that as you asked, you know, where'd the storytelling come from? It's the Humans of New York that later became successful. The storytelling blog that's so well known today looks nothing like the Humans of New York that I dedicated my life to. And that was all about photography. And so, you know, it started with a dedication to figuring out how I was going to structure my life around doing what I enjoyed, which was photography. And everything else grew out of that. And that takes kind of a faith, and that takes kind of, you know, a faith in yourself that you're going to become who you need to be along the way, and a faith in the idea that the idea is going to become what it needs to be upon the way. And yeah, it takes stepping out before you're ready to begin. And so, you know, the simplest way I can put it is just don't wait for perfect. You just cannot wait for the perfect idea.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Bye, man.